Hello, it's Paul Green here with another one of our Focus On panels where we regularly bring together a panel of people that I consider to be experts in their various fields, and we just discuss a particular topic for 30 to 40 minutes or so, which hopefully anybody watching this live or on replay will find it engaging. I guess we will see. If anybody tunes in today, then please feel free to put some questions in the comments of whatever platform you're on, and we should be able to pick those up and pull them to the assembled brain trust that I have here today. So without further ado, I'm going to let you guys just introduce yourself and just say who you are and what you do, and then we'll crack on with the conversation. So Mike, do you want to let people know who you are and what you do?
Okay, so it's Mike from Compass. The web address is on there. What we do is have very, very hands-on operational stuff with companies, fixing things, making things work, all the stuff that drives profitability and cash flow, but from the operational point of view, not from the money point of view, but we're driving what people do every day.
Excellent, thank you very much. And Mark?
Hi, Mark Exley from Gravitas HR Solutions, providing SMEs with HR support in the local area. Really what we're trying to do with companies is help them to survive and to thrive in the current environment. And it's be interesting today in this discussion because data is quite an important aspect within HR and what people should and shouldn't do. It could be quite a deal breaker for many businesses.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much. And Russell, who kindly stepped in last minute, is my third time lucky for a panelist today. So thanks for putting yourself in the limelight, Russell. So let people know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Paul. I guess I'm that really weird one on the question time panel. Yeah.
Russell and everywhere else, Russell.
And everywhere else, yeah. Russell from QRB. We specialise in project management and IT service management solutions. So we do a number of training courses, either formally in areas like Prince2 or ITIL or Agile. But we essentially help organisations look at what they're doing and see if they can do that more efficiently and more effectively.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, you've already touched on the data thing, Mark. So why don't we come back to you in terms of your perspective then? You've already commented on the importance of data with regard to a HR perspective. So do you want to elaborate on that to kick us off?
Okay, so in the past, you had to keep all your HR data in paper files. So that means the personal data on individuals who work for you, and they had to be in a locked cabinet somewhere secure. So obviously, as time's gone on and we've now GDPR, it's even more important. Many HR systems, cloud-based systems, will hold a lot of that data. But it is important that people look at what they need to keep and how long they need to keep it for, because there is that 7 years of keeping things for 6 or 7 years after someone's left the business. But there's very small amounts of data that need to be kept that long. But it is also about not just keeping scraps of paper all over the place, even if it's a case of just scanning it and putting it into a cloud system and not having to keep the paper. I think it's less is more, really. I think people need to be aware that they need to be keeping stuff secure, even if that is somewhere in the cloud, rather than actually in a locked cabinet. But where you do have data, that is written form or on paper, it needs to be kept somewhere safe and secure when it relates to an individual's personal information.
And I guess that's evolved over time, hasn't it, as technology has become more to the forefront of what businesses use. So it's less, is it less paper in a locked cabinet now and more cloud-based stuff?
Well, in the olden days, when I had my first job, which was in the 80s, we went to a computer-based system. And so what happened was that everyone's personal files were pulled apart and various statutory documents were kept, and all the rest was microfiched and put onto the system. And that was actually, believe it or not, in 1987 that happened. Right. But since then, things have become a lot more sophisticated. Cloud-based systems, there's a number of off-the-shelf cloud-based systems that people can use for HR data, and they also use those to manage holidays, sickness, and other processes within their organization, employee reviews, that kind of thing. But in essence, there is a core a core element of every system is for personal data.
Yeah, microfiche, that takes me back to my university days, I think, looking up stuff in the library, showing my age now. So Mike, I guess you look at many aspects of a business. And how do you see the importance of data within the areas that you look at when you're working with one of your clients?
Okay, so data, in the data that I focus on is data that helps people understand their business. And when I say understand their business, it's what they're doing for their customers as well as what's happening inside their business. So data, I kind of split it up into sources and types, if you like. So you've got data which is in your accounting system. You could have data that's live. Let's say if you're in a retail environment that's coming in from the tills, recording transactions. You could have the ERP, MRP, which is business-wide data software where it carries lots and lots of information, which is specifications. It could be purchase orders and a whole load of other stuff. Could be simple Excel spreadsheets that businesses often use, depending on their size, Excel spreadsheets to accumulate and check and track information. And you could be getting data from your website, like your Google Analytics showing activity. But you could be getting data, for example, from machines and plant, or from people where they, for example, where they clock in. Another sources, you could be getting information from your energy consumption. So all of these things, your energy meters are telling you things. So all of these things are still data, but the data for a different purpose, say, compared to what Mark's talking about. But they make a difference to how the business functions and how successful it is or otherwise. It shows where change is needed. So we'll come back onto it later, but that's just my head and data is in a slightly different place, say, to where Mark comes from.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Thank you very much. Russell, what about you? What's your experience of the importance of data when you're working with your clients?
Well, I was just actually just reflecting on what Mark was saying there about cloud systems, and back in the 1980s, when I first worked on mainframes, that was the basis of cloud computing. It was all of our data was shared from one storage place. We had dumb terminals connecting to it. They were just screens and keyboards. But the technology, cloud-based wise, was probably more steam from your kettle than Cumulus Nimbus that we have today. It's just expanded a lot more. So for me, data, it's important not just from a data perspective, but I think of how my clients can get information and knowledge from that, because you have data coming from everywhere, as Mike just said. There's data everywhere, but no information to gain knowledge from sometimes. It's how you use that and how you need to use that in your business to be able to deliver value to your clients, and how you look at it. So it's not just for me about the protection of it, which of course is very important, but it's about how you access that, how easy is that, and what do you need to get from your data to actually truly provide that value for your end client.
Mm-hmm.
I think also you've got to look at how much data, touching on what you've said there, Russell, there is an excess of data and there's a shortage of proper information. So it's how it's pulled together, and also deciding who needs what, so that they've got a minimum of what they need, but they can really do something useful with it. And yes, I think it has a good relevance for clients, but also internally for running the business. So it's about how profitable and how successful that business can be, how much stress can be reduced in a business by using the data, accumulating and reviewing data wisely, so that people have got stuff that they can use and make some meaningful difference with.
Mm-hmm. Mark, do you think with the advent of GDPR that small businesses are more conscious of the data they have and the data they hold and the appropriateness of how they're storing it?
I'd like to say yes, but I'm not actually sure that a lot of people I think GDPR was a big thing, and a lot of people use that as a wedge in the door to get into companies and how important it was. I think people have kind of forgotten about it now, but a lot of the disciplines that they put in place are still in are still in place as well. So when going on to the HR system side of things, it is a business efficiency tool as well as a way of having security of data. And I think that's the key to it. I think people now think of cloud-based systems and something that's got remote access and all that kind of thing as being more the norm. So they are utilizing a lot of systems. We still get clients come to us who still want to use spreadsheets for things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just HR related, it's processes within their business.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just that, it's that leap of faith usually from small business owners to accepting that something that's sitting in the cloud is probably better than something that's sitting on their laptop on a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
It's that leap of faith which some people are slower to take that. And it is an age thing. It's older business owners who are more reluctant to do it unless they're already in that kind of technology space anyway and have always been in it. But a lot of people still use spreadsheets and sometimes multiple spreadsheets. So you have to input onto several spreadsheets when you've done something with a client. It's sort of 5 or 6 different tasks after that rather than just one. It doesn't make any sense, but I think it's just people's fear of change and the kind of concept that they hide behind, which is not broken, don't fix it. Reality could be much better. Seems to be lost on them, but that's partly because of the fear of change and them not understanding it fully.
Yeah, I guess it's the modern day version of keeping your money under your mattress because you know it's there, don't you? I guess from that point of view. So, building on what Mark said, Mike, what's your experience when I go into some small businesses? I find that a number of things. Either they haven't got access to the data that they need, they're not actually measuring certain stuff or taking in data from any of the sources they've got, or they may be doing that, but they've got a lot of duplication of this data, which Mark was touching on. They've got to enter sort of 3 different spreadsheets to capture something. Well, what's been your experience like that? And is there any way that you work with your clients to overcome that and get them in a better position so they can actually use their data effectively?
So access-wise, I think first of all, people don't realise what data they've got there. So in some cases, they're not even looking to access it. And I've extracted data from accounting systems, which has been really helpful to companies to understand sales trends, buying trends, and costs and other things. So they don't necessarily know that it's there; they're not using it. But that's also when people have an Excel spreadsheet, they do something very targeted if they maintain it. But if they go to some more complex system, then it's not always set up correctly, but it's focused on just data. It's just a capture of numbers. And what never gets really set up properly is the actual reporting, where you involve the people and say, what do we need to know? And different people need to know different things. So the data, it starts off with a promise of masses of things, but in reality, they don't get anything out of it because it's never been set up to get stuff out of it easily. So the access is not necessarily difficult, but it needs preparation so that it's focused for the right people. The duplication, definitely. You see different people, especially if they're working on separate Excel spreadsheets. So there's definitely an overlap of what people are entering and entering more than once. So your sales department is entering an order, your accounts department's entering some of the same details, your dispatch department's entering a lot of the same details. But it's a question of whether a business is willing to go automated. And have they got the discipline to go automated? So there's lots of good stuff that's available without massive complexity, but it's being determined to get it and setting it up right for the people to use it. So that's what I would do with the client and say, what do you need to know and how do we get it? Is it there? Good. Now let's take it and put it in a format that we can use regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. Russell, over to you. So is there a danger that if this data is available, and again, based on your experience, and do you find that some businesses may be like a little, they're afraid is the right word, concerned about paralysis by analysis in terms of having too much information at their fingertips that, you know, it takes them half a week just to analyze it while their business just plods along. What's been your experience of that, and is there any solution to that?
Would have been my point. Yeah, there is such a lot there. For me, it's making sure that we get the right things that we need to look at. You know, as Mike's just said, it's about understanding what the requirements are, and then kind of like looking at what data we need together to get that information. There is a lot. There is overkill, and yes, there is the idea of analysis paralysis that you could get stuck in, and it's almost like retraining yourself to get out of that, to know what is enough before you can actually make a decision and move on, because otherwise you will get stuck. You will just spend all your time looking at this information, and not really getting to a decision. And that's the important thing, is to get to a decision so you know what to do and where to go.
Yeah. In my day, we used to have balanced scorecards. Are they still a thing? Is that something that you come across?
They are still a thing, yes. And we use them in lots of different areas. I mean, change management uses them quite a bit to look at, you know, the effects of change on different areas of the business, from both a positive and a negative perspective. But again, you need data for that, you know. And when you're looking at using something like a balanced scorecard, it is about making sure you collect the right thing. But again, at the end of the day, it's all about making the right decision with the right information.
So, Mark, with some of your clients outside of the HR side, I'm not sure whether you get to see this, but what would your opinion be in terms of how well SMEs use the data in their business outside of just the HR stuff?
It's very much about which sector they're in. So we have various clients. We have some larger clients who probably do use the data quite well, who've got systems and processes, and they've automated a lot of things, and they're in more of, I wouldn't say technology necessarily, but they're on the periphery of the technology sector. And I think that they tend to use it more. I think when you've got businesses that are very much grown from scratch, possibly in a trade, it's more difficult for those people to use it, other than in accounting, strangely enough, because wherever you've got some sort of professional accounting, and a lot of SMEs now will use QuickBooks or Xero, and I think then that started to get them into the mode of thinking there might be other applications that they could use to help them. So I don't think it's necessarily an issue with SMEs that's not in larger companies. I'm sure, well, I would say I'm sure that there's some larger companies who are still working on spreadsheets and that kind of thing. They may well have an accounting system, but within the business, within the silos within the business, there will be all sorts of antiquated practices going on. And I think with SMEs, once you establish a financial benefit from going to a data-driven business where you're actually utilizing systems, etc., then you're more likely to see a more agile response from a smaller SME, because they can do things quicker. They're not having to go by a committee. Someone can make a decision. And that's one of the things we always say, is that when we talk to a small business owner and we make a proposal to them, they're actually putting the hand in the pocket to give you the money. And it's exactly the same when you're talking about whether they go down the route of utilizing data, using technology to actually manipulate that data and make themselves more efficient. Once they establish the financial benefits of it, they're much more likely to go for it, and they can do it more quickly than a bigger company.
Nothing
depends on the scientific demand. I mean, if the people in the company are asking questions, or the people running the company want it to be run and used, run on a kind of scientific basis, then they'll make demands to get the data. Otherwise, it just gets ignored. So then once it's given, it needs to be given in such a way that people get on with it and use it. Whereas if they've got to spend 3 hours manipulating the report to get the bits that they want, they just leave it. So it depends on how scientific they want to run the business.
Yeah, so going back to the sort of spreadsheet comfort blanket, which I guess a lot of small businesses are very used to, because they're familiar with it and it's been around for decades. Do you think now that and I'll bring this to you, Mike, first. Do you think now there's almost like an overwhelming amount of different types of applications and software on the market? Because it seems, when I'm scrolling through Facebook, there's another time management system or another piece of software that's the best at doing whatever it's the best at. And it's like, and I know some of you will know Mark Coster. I know he's been through a number of iterations in terms of, finding a CRM system that works best for him. So do you think there's an element of that? Do you see that in your world, that it's just so much overwhelm in terms of what businesses choose? They just don't choose, they stick with what they know?
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a lot out there. I think it's also the way that it's sold into them. So it's sold in an oversell, in the sense like, this system will tell you everything. Your business will be amazing. Everything will be dead easy. Touch of a button, it's fantastic. The reality is that the time it takes to set it up kills the project. It kills it in terms of enthusiasm, and it kills it in terms of cost. So I think what you have to be doing is you have to sit down and say, what is it that we actually need to know? Can we have some room for expansion without turning the whole world upside down? And then also do it in phases, so that you start to get things better than they were, but not go to the nth degree in 5 minutes, because it won't happen. And then you choose something that's of the right scale that suits what you're trying to do. Otherwise, people just become overwhelmed in the preparation for the project and they lose interest.
Absolutely. Didn't realise, but Mark's tuning in, so he just sort of said thanks for the name check. Thanks for tuning in, Mark. Feel free to ask any questions or comments for the panel today. Where were we? Russ, yes, go ahead, Russ.
Can I just add a little bit of personal experience to this from something that happened to me last year? Was that I thought, I saw an advert from a very large organisation that does a very well-known CRM system, saying that they had a module that was specially tuned for SMEs. And I thought, you know what, I'll have a look at that. And I signed up for the free trial. It took me about 2 days to go through the training videos, all of which I immediately forgot after I watched the last one. And then as I was actually trying to put my data into it, I was thinking, this is going to take me all of my time to maintain a CRM. I won't have any customers to put in the CRM because I won't have time for them, and that was supposed to be in tune for SMEs. And, it was just, it's always about thinking what's good for you. Yes, there's an abundance of these things out there. It's about thinking of what you need to run your business. And is a tool easy enough to use? Is it, flexible enough for you as a business? And will it do it what you want it to do?
Yeah, I think, like I said, that certainly I think was an exercise that Mark's gone through over his journey. And similar to me, when I look at the way that I've handled data in my business, ultimately it's culminated in having a bespoke CRM system that manages the data that I want, how I want to manage it, rather than trying to backfit, an off-the-shelf piece of software and try and fit that into your business, which is where we would have explored with Ashish had he been able to make it today. So Mark, on your business journey, has things changed within your business in terms of how you've managed data? Have you evolved over the years?
I still have a couple of spreadsheets.
You can't be a spreadsheet, Mark, can you?
Yeah, I know, but yeah, we've got a CRM system. We use Xero. We use a time recording system as well. So we've got all this stuff. I was going to add that what I've seen is that a lot of companies will come out with a system, say it's a finance system, and then they'll say, well, how can we add value? So they'll then start bolting on modules to do other things. And it's very tempting for companies to think, oh, we've got the finance system, let's go for the other modules as well, when actually there are far better tools out there that can do that job, because it's not their area of competence. They've just added something on as a way of trying to get a bit more revenue. And I think that's another danger that people can fall down, is that they get a very good, say, accounting system, but the bolt-ons that they also get with it that they try to use are not that good. And it would be the same for a CRM type system that says, oh yeah, we've got an HR module or whatever it may be. I think people need to be quite selective over it and find something that works for them.
Yeah, yeah. Mike, is technology getting better now? So for these companies that have data distributed on different legacy systems or on different pieces of software, do you think now that technology is getting more evolved, it makes it easier to have a connectivity between these different pieces of software? I mean, I don't fully understand Zapier, but I know Zapier is a piece of software that tends to, try and bring data together to a certain extent, and there's various other platforms. What's your experience of that? Do you think technology is helping these legacy systems and these data silos be brought together so they are more comprehensive for a business to use?
Yeah, and I think also it makes the step for the change easier, because although you have the specialisms from Sage were classic because they went out and bought these modules exactly as you're describing, Mark, and they went out and bought the company, let alone the modules. And they brought them all into their system with a view to integrating. But the simpler way of doing, like with the Zapier, etc. But if you can find a joining piece of software, then you can still work with the items that you're comfortable with, but avoid duplication of adding in data, and it gives other people access. So the salespeople can see what the buying people are doing and all the other links that come across a company. Even if you want to go out and sell something, you can see where the credit account's up to for whether you should be doing that transaction or not doing the transaction. So it gives a lot better exposure. And it means that you don't have to start again. So technology has definitely helped.
Yeah, it also seems to me that there's a lot more sort of like a dashboard built into these pieces of software now. So you've got like an instant overview. I know Xero, when you open that up, has an immediate indication of where you're at financially with some little charts and things like that. Is that been your experience, Russ, over the years? Do you think that things have got easier to use?
Yeah, and those kind of graphical user interfaces that connect different data sources together have evolved over the years as well. We were certainly when working in the health service, we had lots of different systems in lots of different parts of the hospital. But when we wanted to view it all together, we looked for a kind of virtual database front end to it all. So we could actually in one window just go to these different data sources and it would put it all in one place for us. And that has evolved over the years to be a very useful kind of tool, really. So even if we do have lots of different data sources, we don't necessarily need to amalgamate them all into one physical thing. You can get tools that will look at these different things and bring that together for you.
It depends on communication within your organization as well, because you can keep them separate if the people talk to each other and share information in the right way, so that you can still have that Excel spreadsheet. But if you send it out to the people who need it, so it's got the bits in it that they need and they can work with it, and you have the review on what is an acceptable time frequency or length basis, then you can still use the separate systems if you've got the communication internally. Because a lot of it, for example, it's all very well saying, right, well, we've got this order in and it's a big rush. It's all very well saying, well, the system says I can change it because I can see that I've got all the parts. But you still need to go and talk to the human beings, let's say, if you're running production or whatever, and say, well, actually, can we make this change? What else does it, what's the impact of making this change? Can I go back and confirm to the customer? So the system can tell you a lot, but the reality is you still need the people.
Yeah.
Something interesting that I remember from my past was I worked for quite a large retailer who happened to have catalogue shops, and we had an initiative called the 5 Dials, and so all the different warehouses around the country, we're talking major sized operations, we had our 5 dials, and it was 5 operational measures of efficiency. And we used to put it on a flip chart in the entranceway as all the staff came into the building. They'd see what the dials were in terms of pick efficiency, error rates, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, being the communication wasn't the best around the company abandoned the 5 dials after a short time because no one was really interested in it. But our site, we were interested in it, so we didn't realise And we had a major royal visit from some of the directors, and they were shocked to find that 6 months after everyone else had stopped doing this, we still had this 5-dial flip chart with the weekly figures on it. And they were quite fascinated by the fact that we still did this and anyone had taken any notice of it. But that's just a communication thing again. We were actually talking to people within our little silo, tiny silo, but the rest of the company weren't bothering with it.
I've got this picture of you now, Mark, in this nice little country pub behind the bar, and it's called the 5 Dials. So
I actually use my own. I've got my own 7 dials, which is our 7 financial measures that I do for my own benefit. Actually, old habits die hard, Paul.
No, absolutely. So if we could just touch on customer data for a minute, because I think that's a very underutilized resource within most small businesses. You know, at best they have it obviously for their invoicing system, and that's pretty much how they use it, is just to send that invoice, and that's pretty much, you know, it. They don't really do anything else creative with it. What would be, if any, your insights into that and the small businesses that you've come across? Do they manage their customer data in an effective way? Mike, what's your view?
So I think for the first part is kind of how things are set up, because you can have an invoice, let's say, at a very high level, but there's other detail that would be important within that invoice. But if you've not set it up from the beginning, so you actually have to set it up to capture all the detail, and then maybe you close it down after because you decide, well, I don't need 10 things, I need only 2 or 3 are worth what we want. But it's effortless to capture the 10, but you can present back on the 2 or 3. So it's there, but it depends again who's responsible for doing something with it. And if that responsibility is not allocated for somebody to be looking at it and sharing it in a meaningful way and having the discussions, then it's not going to get used. But there's so many benefits that can come from it, because you can talk to your customers for predictability. And that means you can have the right thing available for when they need it, and you can turn things down and turn things up as and when to suit. So again, it's about the setup, and then it's about using it. If it's really wanted, then do it. If not, move on to something else. But it is there to get.
Yeah, Russell, what are your thoughts?
Very similar, to be honest.
You're just going to say ditto, are you?
Yeah, well, more or less. Yeah, it's I mean, I see a variety in different organisations, and I mean, I still work from a good old spreadsheet. You know, I mean, my customer data is held not so much on my domain, but it's held elsewhere. But it's all about how you want to keep connected with your clients, really, and how you want to keep connecting with that customer database. And I think one of the things that we often do is forget about the clients that we've already signed up and we've delivered to. You know, if we're looking to grow a business, or if we're looking for more sales, we often chase new stuff. And actually there's this huge clump of data of existing clients that have bought from us previously that we don't seem to think about utilizing, and that for me is where I see the biggest areas that we could use that.
Yeah. Mark, what about you? What are your thoughts on customer data?
Well, I think it depends on the size of your business as to how many customers you've actually got as well. Certainly we use our CRM for that, so that we've got effectively an individual electronic cloud-based file for every client, and every interaction we have with them via email or anything we send to them is all held on there. So we can always go back. I mean, where it's been useful for us is when we've, say, got into a situation where people are saying, well, have you told us about something? And we can look back and see immediately, without having to interrogate email systems. We can see, just looking on their portal within the CRM, exactly what we've done with them. And we can also use it to reference other similar companies that we've worked with as well, and try and come up with a plan. So yeah, I think it is useful to have all that data. I think we used to work longhand on everything, and we still use spreadsheets, as we said. So we've still got all our all invoicing data is all on spreadsheets, so we can see where the invoice trail goes in terms of the money. But I think when it comes to actually interaction with clients, you've got to use some kind of system. You can't expect just to sort of troll back through thousands of emails to try and find out, which I know a lot of people do. And there are the odd occasion when for some reason it's not copied to the system where you might have to do that, but that's very rare for us.
Okay, and final point, just to wrap this up. So data is arguably one of the most valuable assets within a business. And you had Chris been on, we would have been talking more about the risk to the security of that data and cybercrime. So I guess my final question is, and I'll come back to you, Mark. I'm going to reverse all of this time just to judge it up a little bit. So do you think small businesses are doing enough to protect the data within their business?
Probably not. I think it's a critical incident kind of scenario, isn't it? You know, people think they get away with it and they think, oh, we've never had a problem, and we're all a bit guilty of that. So you tend to carry on doing what you're doing. I think it is something that people should pay more attention to.
Yeah, I certainly seem to be getting more phishing emails now, you know, purportedly from banks or HMRC or whatever. So, you know, they seem to be more prevalent. Russell, what are your thoughts? Do you think small businesses are doing enough to protect their data?
Again, I'm with Martin. Probably not. You know, it's being aware of also platforms that use algorithms that do throw up the spam stuff from banks and stuff, and being aware of that. You know, because also what we interact with on platforms like maybe LinkedIn or something, or Facebook, you know, that is always looking at the data that we put into that. And looking at that side of it as well, and it's being aware of how it gets connected elsewhere. But yeah, I think we have to be really mindful of the fact that yes, we do need to protect our data in some way, and whether we do that locally. I mean, I don't keep a lot of customer data locally on my infrastructure. You know, it's all in other organizations that look after it and protect it, so it takes a bit of that risk away from me. There is a bit of risk still with doing that, but it means I don't have to spend so much time looking after it myself.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Mike? Do you think small businesses do enough to protect their data?
No, the answer is definitely no. But I see there's two parts to it. So you've got what I call the direct protection, where they can control the logons in various ways. They can control who gets access to what, and I think there's a fair bit of that done, I think. But the other part is that with people working remotely, it's suddenly opened up a huge amount of backdoors which people hadn't perceived. And also with the USBs and all this sort of thing, you can take huge amounts of data in a very short time. And that's very difficult to protect, especially if you've opened up somebody's access remotely, knowingly or unknowingly. But it takes a whole policy to do it, and that's sometimes awkward for the users. But it's striking that balance between security and the damage reputationally and commercially that comes from it, and sometimes inconveniencing the users.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for your time today, guys. We'll wrap it up right there. I'm sure we could talk about data for much longer, but I like to keep these under 45 minutes max. We do these every week at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Next week, we've got an all-female lineup, and we're going to be looking at strategy and personal development. I don't have a topic specifically for that, but I think, given the lineup, that we might look at the sort of evolution, if that's the right word, of women leaders in business. So that might be an interesting topic to explore next week and see what my panelists think about that. So please do tune in next week at 11 a.m. Thank you very much again, guys, and particularly Russell for standing in last minute.